Have you ever noticed how the strongest women, the most grounded, the most unshakable, are often the ones walking by themselves? Not because they can't find people to walk with, but because they've been set apart. Chosen women don't blend in. They don't follow the crowd. And when you're chosen, you'll learn quickly. It's a lonely road, but it's the only road that leads to where you're supposed to be. When a woman is chosen, one of the first things she learns is that separation is not rejection, it's protection. It's easy to misunderstand that because when you're walking alone, the silence can feel like abandonment. People drift away, friends stop calling, relationships fade, and at first, it looks like loss. But when you step back and really see it, you realize it was never loss at all. It was preservation. Because not everyone can be trusted with the weight of your purpose. Not everyone can be close to a woman who carries something bigger than herself. And when you're chosen, that separation is what keeps your calling intact. Think about it. If everyone had access to your time, your energy, your spirit, you'd be pulled in 100 directions, drained before you even had the chance to do what you were made to do. Separation keeps you from scattering yourself to people who don't value you, to circles that don't understand you, and to environments that would rather use you than protect you. Walking alone may not feel comfortable, but it builds a fence around your purpose, keeping out the distractions that would destroy it. Most people see being alone as something to escape. They scramble to fill the silence, they rush to be around anybody just so they don't feel empty. But a chosen woman understands that silence is not her enemy. Isolation is not her punishment. It is her sanctuary. It is the place where she can hear things no one else can hear. It's where she can receive the clarity, the direction, the strength that would never be available to her if she was surrounded by constant chatter. That separation is where she becomes anchored, grounded, rooted in who she is, so when the world finally sees her, she's unshakable. And here's the truth most people will never admit: separation exposes who's real. Because when a chosen woman steps back, when she takes a stand and refuses to compromise her values, people show their true colors. Those who were only around for convenience fall away. Those who couldn't handle her standard walk off. Those who wanted to benefit without contributing leave empty-handed. It hurts, yes, but it also reveals the few who truly belong. A chosen woman isn't meant to carry everybody. She's not meant to be accessible to just anyone. That kind of accessibility dilutes her strength. She has to protect her space, not because she's selfish, but because her calling requires focus. And separation doesn't just protect her from people, it protects her from versions of herself that she's outgrown. The woman she used to be, the one who settled for less, the one who stayed quiet when she should have spoken, the one who accepted treatment beneath her worth. She can't survive in the life she's called to build. So walking alone becomes the process of shedding, releasing, cutting away every habit, every pattern, every attachment that could sabotage the future. That's not rejection. That's refinement. You see, chosen women don't walk alone because they're unwanted. They walk alone because they are safeguarded. They are being kept from places and people that could destroy their destiny. They are being hidden while their strength is being formed. They are being separated, not to punish them, but to prepare them. And when the time is right, when the foundation is solid, when the roots are deep enough, she will step out, not needing the approval of the crowd, not begging for company, not depending on anyone's validation, but fully ready to carry what she was born to carry. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because separation is the shield that protects her purpose. When a woman is chosen, she quickly learns that not everyone can handle her standard. And it's not because she demands too much, it's because she refuses to settle for too little. That's what sets her apart. She carries herself in a way that says, I know my worth, and I won't lower it to make anyone else comfortable. And that alone is enough to make people walk away. Because the truth is, it's easier for most people to stay where they are than to rise to where she's going. Her standard isn't about being difficult. It's about alignment. A chosen woman knows what kind of energy she allows into her life, what kind of conversations she entertains, what kind of treatment she accepts. She's not interested in games, manipulation, or people who only show up halfway. That eliminates a lot of company. And while some might see that as a loss, she sees it as clarity, because the people who cannot meet her standard aren't meant to go with her. What most people don't understand is that a standard is not just about how you treat yourself. It's about how you teach others to treat you. A chosen woman sets the tone. She makes it clear through her actions and her boundaries that she values her time, her energy, and her spirit too much to compromise. And that level of conviction is intimidating. It makes some people uncomfortable, not because she's wrong, but because her presence exposes what they're not willing to do for themselves. You'll notice this when she refuses to settle. People call her too much, too demanding, too picky, too strong. But in reality, she's just unwilling to shrink to fit their comfort zone. And people who have grown used to taking advantage of others can't stand being around someone who sees through them. So they leave. Not because she pushed them out, but because her standard revealed they never belonged there in the first place. And yes, it can be lonely. When you're chosen and you live by a higher standard, the crowd gets thinner, the invitations become fewer, the circle gets smaller. But what she loses in quantity, she gains in quality. Those who stay, those who rise to meet her level, those who respect her boundaries, they are the ones worth walking with. A chosen woman would rather walk alone with her integrity intact than walk with many and lose herself in the process. Her standard also protects her from counterfeit connections. Without it, she could be swayed by sweet words, empty promises, or superficial gestures. But because she knows what she stands for, she isn't fooled by appearances. She can see past charm and recognize character. She can separate talk from action. And that kind of discernment saves her from investing in relationships, whether personal, professional, or spiritual, that would drain her instead of build her. This is why not everyone can stay close to her, because being near her requires growth. It requires accountability. It requires people to bring more than excuses and take responsibility for who they are. And not everyone is willing to do that work. Some would rather call her standards impossible than admit they're not willing to rise higher. But that doesn't move her. She understands that her calling can't afford compromise. And so she accepts the cost. She accepts that her standard will intimidate many, repel some, and challenge others. But she also knows it will attract the right ones, the few who respect her, value her, and walk with her without trying to change her. Those are the people worthy of her trust. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because not everyone can handle her standard. A chosen woman understands something that many people never come to terms with: she wasn't built to follow. That doesn't mean she refuses guidance or thinks she knows it all. It means her spirit won't let her blend into a path that was never hers to begin with. She carries vision inside her, and vision is heavy. It demands movement, it demands direction, and it demands courage. And often, that courage looks like stepping out into places no one else has gone yet. That's why she walks alone, not because she's incapable of belonging, but because she's been designed to lead the way. When you're chosen, you can feel it. There's this tug inside you, a restlessness when you try to fit in with the crowd. While others are content to stay comfortable, you can't. While others celebrate mediocrity, you feel called to something higher. That difference doesn't always make sense to people around you, and sometimes it doesn't even make sense to you. But over time you learn what feels like discomfort is actually direction. That pull is what separates a leader from a follower. A chosen woman knows that walking behind others can only take her so far. She respects the steps of those who came before her, but she also realizes that her assignment is not to duplicate their journey. It's to create her own. And that means she has to be willing to take steps that may not make sense right away, steps that others are too afraid to take, steps that sometimes lead her into isolation before they lead her into impact. The thing about leadership is that it doesn't come with a map. It doesn't hand you a crowd that cheers you on from the beginning. Most of the time, leadership means walking with nothing but faith, trusting the vision you've been given, and being okay with the fact that nobody else sees it yet. That's the burden and the blessing of being chosen. People won't always understand why you're moving differently. They won't get why you can't just settle, why you can't just go along, why you won't just conform. But deep down, she knows. It's because her path was never meant to look like theirs. And yes, that comes with loneliness. Leaders walk ahead, and ahead is often empty. It's not crowded, it's not comfortable, but it's necessary, because when a chosen woman steps into the unknown, she clears the way, she pushes back barriers, she opens doors that others were too afraid to touch. And eventually, the very same people who questioned her, who doubted her, who walked away from her, will end up following the path she created. That's what makes her different. She doesn't walk alone forever. She walks alone first. And the strength it takes to go first, to move without applause, to believe without proof, that's what makes her a leader. That's what makes her chosen. She doesn't need permission to take her steps. She doesn't wait for validation to move forward. She knows her worth, she knows her direction, and she knows that following others would only dim the light she was meant to carry. So while others cling to the safety of the crowd, she embraces the risk of the unknown. While others wait for someone to tell them what to do, she listens to that inner voice and dares to step forward. And though the journey may look lonely now, the impact will echo far beyond her. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because she was built to lead, not to follow. One of the most overlooked truths about a chosen woman is that silence becomes her strength. The world around her is noisy, voices pulling her in different directions, opinions trying to shape her decisions, distractions competing for her attention. And for most people, that noise becomes the compass. They move based on what others say, they adjust based on what others think, and they let outside chatter drown out their own voice. But a chosen woman, she learns that walking alone forces her into silence, and that silence is where she becomes unshakable. At first, silence can feel heavy. It feels like emptiness, like loneliness, like something is missing. When you're used to constant conversations, constant company, constant validation, being left with nothing but your own thoughts can feel uncomfortable. But over time, she begins to realize that silence is not empty, it's full. Full of clarity, full of wisdom, full of answers she could never hear when the noise was too loud. That's why her separation is so powerful. In silence, she hears not only her own voice, but also the voice of God, or the quiet direction of her spirit guiding her toward the path that belongs to her. And here's the thing, most people avoid silence because it forces them to face themselves. It reveals what they've been running from. But a chosen woman doesn't run. She confronts. She sits with her pain. She wrestles with her fears. She listens to the questions inside her that others bury with distractions. And because she faces it, she grows stronger. That strength doesn't come from avoiding the silence. It comes from leaning into it, allowing it to refine her, to sharpen her, to center her. Silence also teaches her discipline. It trains her not to respond to everything, not to explain herself to everyone, not to waste her energy on proving her worth. She realizes that not every battle requires her words, not every insult requires her defense, not every misunderstanding requires her correction. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Sometimes the strength lies in standing tall, saying nothing, and letting her presence speak louder than anything her mouth ever could. And in a world where everyone is racing to be heard, silence becomes her advantage. Because when she does choose to speak, her words carry weight. They're not empty. They're not scattered. They're not thrown out just to fill space. They come from a place of reflection, of stillness, of wisdom gathered in those quiet moments when no one else was around. That's why her words pierce deeper. That's why her presence carries authority, because she's not speaking to be noticed. She's speaking because she has something worth saying. There's also peace in her silence, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on who stays or who leaves, on what people say or don't say. She has learned to quiet the chaos outside by first quieting the chaos inside. And when you find that kind of peace, no storm on the outside can shake you. That's why she walks differently. That's why her energy feels different. She carries calm in a world addicted to noise. The loneliness that others fear has become her training ground. The silence that others run from has become her strength. And the solitude that others see as weakness has become her greatest source of power. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because silence has become her strength. When a woman is chosen, one of the most powerful transformations she experiences is that loneliness sharpens her identity. In the beginning, walking alone feels like emptiness, like something is being taken away. The absence of people, the absence of noise, the absence of constant validation, it all feels like loss. But over time, she realizes it isn't loss at all, it's discovery. Because when there's no one else around to tell her who she is, she's finally forced to find out for herself. Most people never get there. They build their entire sense of self on who accepts them, who praises them, who validates them. They measure their worth through the lens of other people's opinions. And as long as they have that crowd around them, they never stop to ask the deeper question, who am I when nobody's watching? But a chosen woman doesn't have that luxury. Her walk strips away the false layers. The loneliness cuts off the outside voices. And in that stillness, she begins to uncover her real identity, piece by piece, truth by truth. She learns what she values, not what she was told to value. She learns what she believes, not what she repeated just to fit in. She learns what she truly wants, not what she pretended to want because it kept the peace. Loneliness has a way of holding up a mirror, and sometimes that mirror shows her things she doesn't like. Maybe the way she compromised, the way she doubted herself, the way she settled for less than she deserved. But instead of running from that reflection, she studies it, she grows from it, and she steps into a stronger version of herself. And here's the thing, identity formed in loneliness is unshakable. When you discover who you are apart from the crowd, no one can take that from you. When you've learned to validate yourself, the praise of others becomes a bonus, not a necessity. When you've built confidence in solitude, the criticism of others loses its power. That's why chosen women walk differently. Their strength doesn't come from being surrounded, it comes from having survived separation. Their identity wasn't handed to them, it was forged in the fire of being alone. Loneliness also forces honesty. Without the noise of other people's expectations, she can no longer hide behind masks. She has to admit her fears, her doubts, her insecurities, and face them head on. And when she does, she finds that the very things she thought would break her actually build her. Her scars become reminders of survival. Her failures become lessons. Her doubts become the fuel that pushes her to prove herself wrong. That's how her identity sharpens, through facing the reality of who she is and embracing it fully. And once that identity is sharpened, she no longer chases acceptance. She no longer begs for space at tables that weren't built for her. She no longer molds herself to fit where she doesn't belong. Instead, she creates her own space. She builds her own table. She embraces the truth that her identity is not negotiable. It's her foundation. That's the beauty of walking alone. Loneliness doesn't diminish her, it defines her. It chisels away everything false until only the real remains. And when she emerges from that season, she carries a certainty that no one can shake. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because loneliness sharpens her identity. What makes the journey of a chosen woman so powerful is that while her path may be lonely, her impact never is. She doesn't walk alone because she isn't meant to connect with others. She walks alone because the path she's on isn't for everyone. But here's the beauty. Even though her steps are often taken in solitude, the results of those steps ripple far beyond her. The sacrifices she makes in silence, the decisions she makes when no one is watching, the discipline she practices when it feels like no one cares, all of it adds up to a legacy that touches lives she may never even meet. People often mistake her isolation for insignificance. They think because she isn't surrounded by crowds, she isn't making a difference. But what they don't see is that every quiet decision, every lonely step, every moment of courage when no one else believed, that's what creates the very change others will one day celebrate. A chosen woman may start in solitude, but she ends in influence. The truth is, not everyone can walk where she walks. Not everyone has the endurance, the vision, or the strength to carry what she carries. That's why her journey requires separation. If she allowed everyone in, the weight of other people's doubts, fears, and distractions would keep her from reaching the place she's destined for. And if she never reached it, the people who needed her story, her wisdom, her leadership, they'd miss out too. Her walking alone is not just for her protection, it's for the benefit of those she will impact later. Think about it. Some of the most transformative figures in history, in faith, in leadership, didn't make their greatest moves surrounded by applause. They made them in moments of solitude, in times of rejection, in seasons when they were misunderstood. But when the time was right, the fruit of their sacrifice was undeniable. The same is true for a chosen woman. Her walk may not make sense now, and she may feel invisible in the process, but her impact will be impossible to ignore when it unfolds. And what's powerful is that she doesn't even walk for recognition. She doesn't do it to be seen. She doesn't endure solitude just to prove a point. She does it because something inside her won't let her quit. Something inside her knows her life is meant to matter in ways bigger than comfort, bigger than popularity, bigger than fitting in. That's what sets her apart. That's why she can handle seasons that others can't. Because she sees beyond herself. Her path isn't for everyone, but her impact is. The lessons she learns in silence, she will one day teach to others. The strength she gains in solitude, she will one day use to lift someone else. The boundaries she protects so fiercely, she will one day use to show others what self-respect looks like. She may walk the road by herself, but the road she's paving will be traveled by many. So yes, being chosen often feels like being isolated. It feels like nobody understands, like nobody sees, like nobody is with you. But what she gains in that walk is something far greater: the ability to leave behind a trail of strength, of wisdom, of courage, that others can follow when it's their turn to walk. That's why a chosen woman always walks alone, because her path may not be for everyone, but her impact will be.